Whether you carry a badge or a business license, those who engage in criminal activities will be held accountable.
Welcome back to Advocacy, Alchemy with Professor Ross. Today we have a good one, guys. Imagine walking into a police department, the very place where justice is supposed to begin, only to find out the officers themselves are fabricating crimes for cash. That's the reality facing Louisiana right now. 4 law enforcement officials, including police chiefs, have been federally indicted in a 62-count criminal case that alleges they helped orchestrate one of the largest known U-Visa fraud schemes in the country. The price? $5,000 per name to falsely label immigrants as victims of violent crime using fake police reports, board certificates, and fraudulent mailings to game the immigration system. Now we have the actual indictment if you want to see the federal charges yourself, including the name of the people involved, the transactions, the fake reports. It's all pinned in the top comment. This wasn't a small town mistake. It was a decades-long conspiracy stretched across multiple departments. And check it out, hundreds of fraudulent visas. So with that, let's jump in.
Well, today in Louisiana, 4 former and current local law enforcement officers, including police chiefs, were federally charged in what prosecutors are describing as a decades-long immigration visa scheme. Investigators allege that these very officers committed conspiracy, immigration fraud, bribery, mail fraud, and money laundering, according to the 62-count indictment that was unsealed this morning. The FBI and Homeland Security carried out the arrests and search warrants across the state yesterday. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson joins us with the details. Priscilla, when you're dealing with people who are seeking immigration, you're generally dealing with a pretty vulnerable population, people who are less likely to speak out when they feel something is wrong or may not feel like they have the resources to get help. So how did this even get on prosecutors' radar in the first place?
Yeah, so we know that prosecutors at some point started to notice an outsized number of armed robberies that were being reported. And what they found is this conspiracy that centers on these U visas. So these are visas, non-immigrant visas for people who witness or are victims of a violent crime and who are helping law enforcement. And so the person at the center of this all is allegedly a Subway owner and operator, Chandrakant Patel, who allegedly would collect payments from these foreign nationals and then pay these police chiefs, former police chiefs and officers to draft up documentation to show that those nationals were victims of crime. So fake police reports, things like that. And these were police officers from across the state. You had Chad Doyle with the Oakdale police chief, Michael Frex-Laney, the Oakdale city marshal, Glenn Dixon, the Forest Hill police chief, and also Tebow Onisha, the former police chief of Glenmora. So all of these officers in this indictment. And I want to play a little bit of what prosecutors had to say about this indictment, and specifically that this is not about the overall police offices, but these officers specifically. Take a listen.
We brought these allegations against who we allege to be corrupt officials, and we are not alleging that these are corrupt police departments.
All the arrests were effected without incident. All the searches effected without incident. This operation went off as cleanly and as peacefully as it possibly could have gone.
Whether you carry a badge or a business license, those who engage in criminal activities will be held accountable.
And prosecutors say that hundreds of visas were approved via this route and that those officers and deputies were paid $5,000 per piece of documentation that they supplied. And now they are facing potentially decades in prison and up to a $250,000 fine if convicted.
Unbelievable. Priscilla Thompson reporting for us. Priscilla, thanks.
Okay, so we have several different locations. We got Oakdale, Louisiana. We have Forest Hills. We have Glenmore, Louisiana. We have a Subway franchise owner named Chandrakant Patel. The big takeaway on how things work. All right, you have immigrants from outside of Louisiana. All right, they're promised U visas. All right, only if they can prove they were victims of certain violent crimes. All right, Patel would collect thousands of dollars from these immigrants. Then the police officials would write fake police reports claiming the people were robbed at gunpoint and other claims. After that, they'd sign federal immigration forms, falsely swearing that these were real cases. Each fake report, $5,000. The operation ran for 10 years, from 2015 to 2025, and the prosecutors think that hundreds of fraudulent cases were approved. All right, so let's get to the law here. These are federal laws we're dealing with. First, fake victims, fake reports. All right, you have counts 1 and 2, all the way to counts 25. You have 18 U.S.C. section 371, conspiracy, and you have section 1546, section A, and that deals with visa fraud. All right, these charges basically form the backbone to this case. All right, according to the indictment, you have police chiefs that signed forms falsely stating that these immigrants were victims of armed robberies. The incidents never happened. The reports were all fiction. The conspiracy ran for almost a whole 10 years. All right, for example, we have Chad Doyle, who signed a visa certification for a D. Patel on August 10th, 2024, claiming that robbery occurred. There was no such crime. All right, the penalty for this, you can get a maximum of 10 years in prison per count of visa fraud and 5 years for the conspiracy. Next, you have bribery for badges. All right, there's 26 counts involved here, okay? All right, this is all found under 18 U.S.C. section 666, section A2. All right, Patel, the Subway franchise owner, allegedly paid $5,000 to one of the sheriff's deputies in exchange for fabricated police report. That's an illegal bribe to a public official, and that's how we talk about on all these counts, there's bribery happening from people who have badges. All right, this also carries a maximum of 10 years in federal prison. And let's move on to the next set of crimes. You have mail fraud, and this from counts 27 to 50. This is all found under 18 U.S.C. section 1341. And in this section of the indictment, each count reflects a specific incident where defendants used either FedEx, UPS, or the United States Postal Service to send fraudulent immigration documents to the USCIS, which is the United States Customs and Immigration Services. A good example, one of these said on September 17, 2024, Dole and Patel mailed a fake I-918B form to the USCIS Center in Nebraska. Each one of these carries a penalty of up to 20 years per count. All right, moving up to the last set of counts, 51 through 62. All these dealt with really cleaning the money laundering and things of that nature. All right, this is found at 18 U.S.C. section 1957 and 18 U.S.C. section 2. Money laundering. All right, prosecutors allege the defendants used the profits from this fraud to buy cars, land, and funnel money through various banks. Some good examples, Patel wired $50,000 to another one of his accounts. Dole used $15,000 to buy F-150. Slaney bought a travel trailer. All right, if the prosecution can prove this or any of these, for each count, it's going to be 10 years per count. That's the maximum. So when you take all these together, that's a whole lot of time that they can receive. When you're talking about, look, the last set, 10 years per count, 27 through 50, those are 20 years per count. 26 counts of bribery, and those are at 10 years per count. So the numbers can start to look ridiculous real fast. All right, so with that, let's move into our evidentiary standards. Okay, let's move into our evidentiary standards. Now, we talk about these daily because they're used for every single case, whether it be a criminal case or a civil case. Now, we're more interested usually in civil cases, but we go over each of the standards, okay? So you start at the lowest and we'll work our way up to the highest. All right, first you have mere suspicion. All right, now this is simply a gut feeling or a vague hunch. It's not enough to legally justify any action by the government or the police. All right, here, simply noticing that several people in the community have U visas, that doesn't prove any fraud. All right, moving up one level, we move up to reasonable suspicion. And this is when the government or the police have enough specific and articulable facts to suggest that some criminal activity is occurring right now. At this level, the police can stop a person, they can detain the person and ask them questions to see if there's any actual criminal activity happening. Here, investigators notice an unusual spike in armed robbery reports tied to U visa applications in small towns. This raised red flags. All right, moving up one level to probable cause. Now, at this level, the government and the police believe there's a fair probability that a crime has been committed and the suspect is involved. At this level, the government can act. The police can arrest you. They can search your property and take things that they believe they're evidence of a crime. They can go back and request a warrant from a judge. This is the level where really all the important action that we always hear about, this is where everything really happens because people get arrested at this level. And this is where the criminal cases really start up in court at this level. A good example, okay, you have a pattern of forged police reports, you have matching payments, identical language across the applications that justifies an arrest and potentially a search warrant. All right, moving up one more level, we have preponderance of the evidence. Now, this standard means it's more likely than not that the allegations are true. This is used in civil cases mostly, all right, when people are suing each other for money, those types of cases. Here, in order to win this type of case, you need 51% of the evidence in your favor. An example, civil forfeiture proceedings, when the government takes property they believe was used for a crime. The seizure, the forfeiture of properties, vehicles, all alleged to be purchased with fraudulent proceeds. This type of case would have to meet this burden of being at least 51% of the evidence has to be in favor of the government to support forfeiture. Moving up a level, we have clear and convincing evidence. Now, this requires a high degree of certainty. This is in between the civil standard and the criminal standard. This means that about 75% of the evidence is in your favor. This also means that there is a high probability that person's claim is true. This standard is used in various types of cases. You'll find it in family law cases for child custody. You'll find it in involuntary commitment cases, administrative hearings where people's licenses are at question. And prosecutors even use this standard when they're going to request an enhancement of a person's final sentence. A good example, federal prosecutors submitted financial records, immigration documents, and law enforcement testimony to support how this scheme is orchestrated. Now, with all that evidence, they may be able to meet this 75% burden if they're going to ask for some enhancement or something of that nature. All right, moving up to our highest level, beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, this is the highest legal standard used in America. It requires about 90 to 95% of the evidence be in the favor of the government in order to convict a person of the charge. What does this level mean? It simply means that there is no other reasonable conclusion besides the defendant being guilty of the charges that are brought. Now, a good example is for a jury to convict these police officers or former police officers, they must believe that the accused knowingly created fake reports and accepted bribes with criminal intent. I think by the time it comes to trial, they're going to have so much evidence, it's probably going to be a fairly easy routine task for them to meet. All right, let's move into our jury perspective next. Now, let's say that you're on this jury. You're going to be dealing with several sets of people. You got some people that are former officers, public officials. You have some that are civilians. Keep in mind that you've heard hours of testimony and reviewed dozens of fake police reports, went through sworn immigration forms, and looked at bank transactions. Now ask yourself, why were so many armed robbery reports filed by the same small town departments? Next, why do these reports follow the same script with little to no victim detail? And you have to ask yourself, would a real crime victim ever rely on a convenience store owner to handle their police paperwork? Another question, why were non-residents of Louisiana repeatedly listed as victims of crimes that law enforcement never investigated further? And does it make sense that a Subway sandwich shop now, that the owner will be connected with this many visa applications? All right, let's go just a little bit deeper. Now, while you're on this jury, do you believe that any of these were administrative errors, or was this just a big calculated scheme? Do you feel the officers knew exactly what they were doing, or does it seem more like a coincidence that it seems a pattern is coming to the top? And the final question, if you let this go unpunished, what does it say about the justice system and the act of justice for real crime victims who need these U visas the most? This is the moment when your sense of truth and your understanding of the law come together. How would you vote if you were back in the jury room and if there was, in fact, a ton of information? Would it be guilty or not guilty? What's going to be some of the very, very important things you need to hear or see to make that determination? This is a case about broken trust. Law enforcement officers turning immigration protections into, well, a hustle. The U visa program is supposed to have a focus on helping crime victims, not enriching police chiefs. This shows how a well-meaning system can be flipped into a cash machine. It's a reminder that oversight and accountability always matter. All right, tell me in the comments, with this case, what's standing out to you the most? Now, this is going to be ongoing. It just was filed. The indictment just happened, so they're going to be probably going through this process over the next year or two, and we'll keep up with it too. Should the officers face maximum time or something less? Also, keep in mind that from what it sounds like, this type of scheme can be pulled somewhere else. Remember, the full indictment is pinned below at the top comment. Like, subscribe, and check back tomorrow. Remember, this is Advocacy Alchemy. I am Professor Ross. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and be safe out there.
Subscribe to Advocacy Alchemy and come back tomorrow at 8:45 a.m.